Hello and welcome to the 40K Parley podcast. This is Book 1, Chapter 5, Part 2, continuation of painting. Oh boy, so we left off with priming last time, and something I want to go back and talk about is assembly for priming. There are certain things, for instance, if you wanted to put detail into Space Marines, but the majority of their armor was going to be black, you'd want to, prime it with a black paint. But if you have any model that would have skin tone on it, you'd have to drop a lot of layers onto it. So you might not want to prime the head in black with the rest of the model and prime it separately. For instance, I have a Goliath rock grinder from the Gene Stealer Colts sitting in front of me. I still have not had any time. We've just had insane rain and flooding here in New England, so it comes and it goes, and it's, as they say, an act of God. We have no control over it, so I haven't had any time to take my minis outside and spray paint. Luckily, I have enough primed where I can sit around and paint those, and there's always plenty to build. Starting to get a little box collection in the corner. Not exactly a healthy sign, but definitely one that I'm into the hobby for sure. Anyways, back to the Goliath rock grinder. So I have it currently ready to be primed, but it is not completely assembled. So I intend to paint a lot of it with White Scar for the prime, and I think it would be really hard to get a metallic look without adding a thick layer of something like Runefang onto it. So yeah, I just looked in my little paint pots, and it's Runefang steel. So I'm going to spray paint the front grinder completely. It's going to be primed completely with lead belcher as opposed to priming with White Scar. So when I paint over it with Runefang, I don't have to, it won't have these dark patches. It'll be a lot harder to see the brush strokes, and it will have a natural, more metallic look to it. I know lead belcher primer costs a little bit more, but it's a lot easier than sitting there and adding that layer as a base to your model with a paintbrush, which I have done, and you're better off priming for sure. I've used Wraithbone priming. That's what I've been doing for my Gene Stealer Colts, because they have a lot of bony protrusions on them, and things like their hands, claws, and feet and head. I've been just touching up with White Scar as an afterthought, and then I add a little bit of Nolan oil to bring out the highlights in the features. So, anyways, back to priming the rock grinder here, and so it's the front of it, and the grinder itself, the turret, and the wheels. I believe I'm priming all of those are going to be primed with lead belcher, and then the main vehicle itself and the two miniatures, which are not attached because I want to put some detail into them before I attach them to the vehicle, and it would be very hard once they are on the vehicle. They will all be primed, like I said, with White Scar. So I'm priming different parts of it before I assemble it. I've been zealous, and my buddy built all his vehicles and then primed them, and there was some parts of detailing that were just so much harder because we didn't take the time to think like, well, why don't we keep the head off because we're going to paint this a different color, or it might be impossible to paint behind this piece once it's attached. When I was doing the Harlequins, I used the hemostats holding the piece of painter's tape, which I talked about in the last podcast, and I believe on the YouTube video I put up pictures of it as well. I used that a lot. There are so many ribbons, and there's very acrobatic poses to the Harlequins, so their limbs are contorted in a lot of angular fashions. And that was a lot of fun to paint, but there were a few where I probably should have thought about painting the sword and the arms before I attach them, because it's just such an elaborate pose. So thinking about things like that while you're painting is important too. So if you're doing like a bunch of Space Marines and you want them to have, like flesh tones, maybe don't attach the heads until after you prime them. Like I said, with lighter primer, there's a little bit more flexibility. But I mean, if you're going to do something like a slap chop technique, which if you're new to the hobby, you've maybe heard this term or maybe seen a YouTube video on slap chop. I would not recommend this method out of the gate. It is too easy to mess up staining. Over the weekend, I got some time to sit down and paint, and I pulled out my acolytes, and I put a lot of flesh tone onto them. I use what is it here? For them, I'm using Kislev flesh. Like I said, once again, I'm probably mispronouncing that. Kislev flesh. Kislev? I don't. I'm gonna go with Kislev flesh. That sounds reasonable. I've been using that as a mainstay of their of the bones on like the plates, the chitin, if you will, on the Gene Stealers. And I got all of the base of the Kislev flesh onto my acolytes. And then, let's see, what else did I put on there? What's this one? Emperor's Children. I have that on there. Still wish it was a little bit lighter. Like I said in the last podcast, I would kill for a lighter Citadel paint. And if I jump ship for anything, it's probably going to be for a pink. I really just would like a lighter pink without having to sit here and mix paints on a palette. That's another thing. As a novice, I have not been mixing paints or paint colors. I'm not saying that it's not something that you can do, but for consistency's sake, when I'm painting, 50 to 80 miniatures in an army, I want there to be a consistency. And currently, like I said, that's kind of why I'm staying with the base colors from Citadel. And like I mentioned in the last episode, it's a common language. You can walk into a hobby shop and be like, hey, I need Emperor's Children. I need the Emperor's Children. Everyone's going to look at you like you're crazy. I want the Emperor's Children. There you go. There's the innuendo for the episode. We got it in early. That's nice. That's nice. I can get my mind out of the gutter for the rest of the episode now. All right. Let's see. So I sat down to paint the acolytes, and I put the 5 of them in front of me. And I grabbed my number 2 brush, and I grabbed the Kislev flesh, and I put that on the palette, mixed in a little bit of water, and then I started to very carefully apply the first layer of it on my models. It is one of the first layers that I'm putting onto the White Scar. Excuse me, no, onto the Wraithbone. I apologize. I primed these in Wraithbone, and then I put on the Kislev flesh. I also used a little bit of lead belcher, and like I said, the Emperor's Children. I need those Emperor's Children. All of them. Give me the Primarchs now. I grabbed a number 2 brush, and like I said, I mixed it around in the paint after I wet the brush, and then I started to apply the layers very cautiously onto these minis. It's my first layer, but you still don't want to do like an absolutely terrible job, especially not with your first layer. Like try to get in there and really do a good job. And a number 2 brush, for me at least, works very well. There wasn't, because I'm putting detail into these models, and there are a lot of detail to do on these models, I didn't have to go too insane with the paint that I put on my palette. And like I said, I just simply shaved the head off of an old toothbrush and filed it down into like a little scoop for my paint and used that to apply paint to my palette. Yeah, DIY 101, like just if you have something laying around that you can use as a tool, it's not always necessarily the best, but in this case, it worked out well. Like I said, it's just a toothbrush handle that I'm simply using as a scoop. So after I put on the first layer, the CH05, I went and, obviously there's some things that I didn't put it onto. I didn't go hard on the first layer. Mainly because a lot of this I'm going to end up staining into like a leather color. And by staining, I mean using, excuse me, let's try and stick to some Warhammer terms here. Shading. And I'm going to use the Agrax. And by adding the Agrax as an afterthought to the CH05, it's going to make it look like leather. I did it on a couple of the appearance, so I should be able to show you an example and see if I can take a picture and put it up with the podcast on YouTube. So, anyways, I'm not worried about the earth shade right now. Like shading is something that you do, at least for me, and as a suggestion, I would say, at the end is when you would start putting in your all of your contrasts and your shades. So, and because of the lead belcher, which is the third color I used. Actually, let's talk about the Emperor's Children first. So, like I said, I used the Emperor's Children to put some paint on the armor plates, and it looks like it kind of looks like this ribbing, like this like there's no skin, and there's just kind of like this pink fleshy muscle, but it's actually on the armor, so it looks really cool. And then I wanted to go a little darker with the metallics, so I used a lead belcher. And eventually that will be shaded with Tyran blue to give it I really like that, kind of blue tint to surgical steel. And I think it's very fitting for Innerworm. So they're going to have a nice little blue tint to them. I'm still debating on what color to do some of the more gorilla style fabric on them. I've been thinking about doing it green, but if I go green, it will be the only, I'm still worried it's going to clash with the pink. Excuse me, the Emperor's Children, and the CH05. So I'm not entirely sure if I want to go with that yet, or my other option was a straight, just dark gray. I don't think I have any dark grays. That would be something I'd have to go pick up for sure if I want to go dark gray. So either way, I'm probably gonna have to take a drive down to the shop this week, and maybe pick up a couple pots of paint to finish these models. I haven't decided how I want to do the blades yet either. There's certain things that I want to put on the tester minis. I believe I talked about tester minis in the last episode a little bit, how I take them out of, like old board games that I have laying around that are just, for whatever reason, everything else got damaged, or there's a ton of board games that I bought. I bought these Magic the Gathering board games at Five Below for, $5, and they came with 70 minis a piece, and there's 5 of them sitting in the closet, and I've just been pulling minis out of there, and I use them as testers. So I prime them when I prime the models that I'm going to paint. And then before I put anything onto one of the models that I don't know what it's going to do, or if I get a new paint from the shop. So I was thinking something like Lauren Forest, I think would be good for the fabrics. Now, if I used Lauren Forest on one of my acolytes to paint the fabric, and then say it just looks terrible next to Emperor's Children, that pink color, I'd be pretty upset. But if I put it on a tester, and, I've slowly been painting up Bud and Lou, I call them. I've got 2 little MTG minis, and they have very Gene Stealer schemes to them. They've been primed in the Wraithbone, and I've used different silvers and different tarnishes and just dry brushing on certain parts of it to see if I like the way it looks. I've stained different parts of the body to see how dark it will actually make the model, and then I left like the back unstained so you can actually see the contrast and not think, well, maybe I could do this. And yeah, like you get to actually see how the stains work, or shades work, and and your contrasts. I found contrasts to be a little bit thicker in the color department than the shades, but not all shades are created equal. Like I said, I have Berserker Bloodshade. And like I said, I was hoping it would leave it kind of like just a dingy, white with very hard red edges. And instead it turns everything pink with very hard red edges. So when I was testing it on, Bud over here, my little, zombie, I put it on his head and, to see if it would fill in and look like a skull with, that's kind of, sinuous and bloody, and instead it looks like a skull that still has like skin and flesh and meat on it. So I was like, well, that's not the look I'm going for. As cool as it looks on this little Magic Mini, it's it's not what I wanted on my model for sure. And I'm so glad that I had thought to test it on Bud. And then I got Lou over here. I think he's a zombie giant from the MTG game. It was based on Hero. I think it was called Heroescape, and it used like the same tiles that Heroescape used. In fact, I see a lot of people selling off the MTG tiles to Heroescape fans because there's no paint on them, and they can paint them as however they want on eBay. I think that's pretty cool that people do that. But yeah, like having testers with you is just so nice. So when I go to, I already know what the Tyrann Blue is going to do when I drop that shade on Lead Belcher because I've used it before. I've used that, and I have used the contrast of Talassar Blue. And the Talassar Blue gives you a nice, even, thick blue coat, like an old hot rod. Whereas the Tyrann Blue, I've used it on gold, and it has like it almost gives it like an odd, like mystical, like look. But when you put it on silver, once again, it like I said, I've been using Runefang for the bright silvers. It gives it such a nice, like surgical steel kind of look to it, like that, like a little bit of cobalt in the shine. On the Lead Belcher, it's going to look a little bit more dingy, but it's still going to fill in awesome, I think. I'm really looking forward to see how that looks, but I've got 2 more layers to put on. Like I said, I have to figure out what I'm going to do for the fabric. And let's see. And then I have to, and then after that, I have to put in some detail work. So I painted the grenades and the cult symbols with lead belcher. So I might stain those, like the grenades I might stain blue, and the symbols I may stain like a pink kind of color. So we'll see. I don't, I may just leave it the way it is for the time being. Who knows? But I want to get the fabric painted up on this. That's for sure. There's a lot of detail on these, and that's kind of what I wanted for my second army. After painting the Ulthwé Eldari, I really wanted a little bit more of a challenge, and the Gene Stealer cult for sure is has been more of a challenge. There's a lot of little detail, especially on these acolytes. Man, it's going to be hard to get in there and paint the guts into the open wounds of the chitin. I've been painting them red, like a very, very, very like crimson red, and then touching them up with let's see, I can grab the colors out of my paint kit. Mephiston red, folks. Heads up on Mephiston. This color, it seems like it just stains worse than any color in the entire Citadel library. Whenever I use Mephiston, it takes me forever to get it out of my brushes. It flecks dust everywhere when I'm scraping off my palette. Like it'll get into your fingertips. It's just, man, oh man, does Mephiston red stain. So I've been using that as like a crimson underlayer, and then over that I'll put Evil Sons to brighten it up. And then I will take Emperor's Children, like that pink color, and just do little bits of touch-ups, almost unnoticeable, before I put on a shade. For those, I believed I used Nuln oil. Yeah, which is kind of my go-to. I love the way it tarnishes gold. And if you paint anything gold, it just looks like you just have this gold lumpy thing. You really kind of need to add a contrast. You need to add some contrast to it, not contrast paints, which you can use, but you need to give it some color contrast. Like you don't want it to just be completely shiny. And I think washing gold down with Nuln oil is perfect. Let's see, what have I been using for gold? Retributor armor. I've been using that base. This is the second most dirty paint pot I own. I don't know why. It was my third base color when I painted my Eldari. Like I said, that's another thing. For your first army, I would pick 3 colors and maybe stick to that. And then maybe buy a couple just little ones to do some detail work with. Like buy a metallic color, and then probably like 1 or 2 browns. I will say there's a lot of things that equate to what looks like leather on models, whether it be like boots or gloves or belts, straps. There's just so much that your mind assumes is leather. I'm not saying you can't paint it other colors. Lord knows I've painted fabrics and numerous colors, so it's not an issue. And like I said, I'm trying to on my Gene Stealer cults, trying to emulate this look of like human skin that's been tanned into leather. So on the let's see, on the standard bearer here, I'm having a lot of fun painting him, for sure, or her. I'm not gonna, assume the gender of my minis unless I assign them. Oh, that sounds terrible. No, we're very we're very inclusive here on my mini table for sure. So. All right, so back to, like I said, like what I was doing as far as painting goes. So I took that number 2, and then I put on the Kislev flesh. And when I was done with that, I did as much as I could with the Emperor's Children. I did as much as I could with those children. They were just, man, there's just 100 bad jokes about this paint. So I took the pink And I did as much with the number 2 brush as I could. And then I went to, I believe, a 000. No, I went to a 0, excuse me. And then I put the rest of the pink Emperor's Children on with a 0 brush. And I was done cycling through all 5 minis and painting everything that needed to be painted on those. I did the third layer that I did was the lead belcher. And I did a lot of the metallic parts of the armor. So pretty much any part of the armor that I did not paint pink got hit with lead belcher. And like I said, I'm going to end up shading it with Tyrian blue at some point. Like I said, I still need to work on these, to work on the fabric. And then once I get the fabric done, I can start taking a 000 brush, putting in a little bit of detail and gore. And then I will do my shades and contrasts. And those are the final touches. Still a couple decisions to be made on the paint job as well. But like I said, sticking to like 3 main colors, you're not going to go insane painting up your first army, because you'll just be like, all right, I have these 3 colors. And I went back, like I said, afterwards and painted in certain details that were different colors. Like there was one head that I believe 2 of my characters in my Yeldar army are not wearing helmets, and one has a shaved head and is using binoculars, and the other one has blue hair. And I didn't paint, those details until near the very end of painting that army, because I wanted to put a little bit of extra effort into the hair and faces. I will say that using things like shades to bring out contrasting features is very nice, but once again, I think it should be, like towards the end, like it should be your last step. So like I said, just a quick tip, like I said, once again, just try and stick to 3 colors for your main, and then, maybe like a brown, a metallic color for your weapons. And then maybe experiment. Like I would definitely recommend Earthshade or Nolan Oil, and just seeing what it can do, and seeing how it can just really bring out shadows in your model. I think it just does such an excellent job. So, like I said, I got those 3 layers done. I still haven't done any of my detailing yet. But I will go a little bit more into depth about that too. With the detailing, it's okay if you mess up. I would keep I keep a big old thick bristled brush. What is this? Does it say the size? It's a 6. And I keep it right near my water. And if I mess anything up, I dip this in my water as quick as I can. I get the tip of that brush and I put it right into where I made the mistake. For me, it's usually I'll hit another piece when I'm pulling away. Like I'll pull away with the brush to put more paint on it, and I'll knock the backside of an arm with silver. And you want to correct those mistakes as fast as possible. And if you take a brush that's wet and just rub it on that area, and then I ball up a paper towel so it has just a little bit of a tip from the corner, and then I can just rub that really quickly into the area where I'm trying to pull the paint off of. This does not always work, and this is one of the problems with shading, is that this will not work if you are putting on a shade or a contrast. It will to some degree, but I mean, like for instance, where like Berserker Bloodshade, where it stains into the white almost immediately. Like it's just going to ruin whatever you don't want that color, and you're going to have to rebase it with white, and that is just going to take time and start making your model look chunky. You do not want any chunky boys out there. You want your stuff to look good. at least good enough. Good enough to play. I've been having a blast painting up these acolytes, clearly. I just wish I had a little bit more time. Oh, another piece of advice. If you've started to paint an army and you are continuing to paint it, I don't. This is probably not the most novel of ideas, but I take other models that I've painted in that army. So, for instance, right now there's 2 appearance and a pure strain sitting on my table on the palette, next to the acolytes that I'm painting, and the 2 testers as well. So I can look over and make sure that I am staying true to the color scheme that I started with. So I'm not, veering off. And, with the Gene Stealers, I want, like, I have the hands and the feet and the head. And like this very, like, bony, like, ashy color. It's really cool. And I, have to constantly remind myself not to paint too far, on the legs. You don't want to hit the feet because you're going to hit them up afterwards with Nuln Oil to give them, a dark, shady, dirty look. And, I see the appearance and I keep looking at, the stains, the shades on the weaponry. And, I just like, oh, wow, that's going to look awesome when I, put it on this blade or when I put it on this, saw. The Gene Stealers have some very interesting weapons, most of them based around mining. I have been kind of perpetuating and, continue to weave the story of, Fleischgate online. And I tried to make them look more like a crew of people that would be, slaughtering animals, essentially, for wholesale across the galaxy. So they're, I like the idea of, surgical steel, like that blue steel. It just has such a nice, kind of clean look to it, that you usually associate with that. And I think it looks so good, next to their skin, which is painted with Kislev flesh, the chitinous Kislev flesh. But yeah, having other things out as references when you're painting an army is obviously a good thing. Say you wanted to paint one of the Space Marine factions, like Blood Angels or something, you'd want to have probably pictures of the Blood Angels, to look at to give you a little bit of inspiration before you just decided to dive right in. And like I said, I started with the testers before I started painting the minis. So I had a pretty good idea of how I was going to paint them and what I was going to do and what paint looks good where. And like I said, you benefit so much from having, just a couple extra garbage minis to paint real quick and be able to slap paint on just to test. It's not something that everybody can afford in the beginning of this hobby. It just so happens I have not had any interest in painting miniatures until the last 6 months. Before that, I just played a lot of board games, and yeah, there's just a ton of minis laying around. So a ton of minis laying around. But I love them. Just like the Emperor's Children. They're all my they're all my children. So my next steps. What are the next steps after I've put these 3 layers on? Like I said, I want to get this fabric going because that's going to be the next layer that covers the most space on the model. And then I will go down to detailing. And the thing about detail painting is if you mess up and hit a base color, you can just one of the last steps I do, and this is once again before I put on shades or contrasts. I'll take the base colors, usually the first 2 that I painted on here, and for this one it was Emperor's Children and the Kislev flesh. I'll take those 2 colors and I will go through and touch up like just in case there was any little mistake, an area I didn't hit, an area I couldn't hit because of its location on the model. So for instance, there's the back of the arm on this one acolyte, and it's just a pain in the butt to hit with the brush, and not end up knocking paint onto the gun holster. So it took a little bit more effort than usual. But like I said, in the end, this is going to be awesome. Like I said, you can put on the details, and you don't, you're using smaller brushes, so you should really kind of be aware of how much paint is on your brush. And there's so many times early on in painting where I just did not recognize the amount of paint that was on a brush or the consistency of the paint, and went to put it on a model and was just like, what the hell have I done? Like, what have I done to deserve this? This looks terrible. And I had to backtrack and fix it or cover up a layer. I learned a lot painting up the Eldari. And I'm not perfect, as I'm sure you've seen from my pictures of the appearance. But I'm definitely getting better. With the Gene Stealers, I think I did a great job with the pure strains. My only personal critique is the fact that they are so old. I just didn't want to take the mold lines off. I was just so afraid that they would just crack, or that the blade would just ruin them, and I'd have to find one of these, Space Hulk 2nd edition, Gene Stealers to fill my army. And I definitely didn't want to do that. I do really like the new Pure Strain model, but I don't think it looks as cool, mold lines and all, as the ones that came with the 2nd edition Space Hulk. I truly do think that these are some of the coolest minis I've painted, and the fact that I batch painted these, and I think they came out pretty well. Yeah, like I said, I'm proud of myself. I don't think it's, like I said, I'm not, a master painter, but you're not going to get good if you don't practice. And like I said, I've mentioned the 3 colors, and I guess the moral of that story is keep it simple. And realize that making mistakes are part of this hobby. You're going to put, like I said, you're going to hit the back of an arm. You're going to hit the wrong side of a gun. You're going to put a gunk of white paint on a black surface, at some point, and be like, oh, man. But I think it's the ability to, adapt and figure out how to, fix the problem, or how to work around it. I used to do a lot of pen and ink drawing. And when you do pen and ink, it's permanent. There's no room for mess ups. So if you mess up at all during pen and ink, it becomes a part of the illustration. And luckily with Warhammer, you can get the paint. Like I said, if you can get the paint off quick enough, and it's not a shade or a contrast, you can get that paint off quick enough if you are ready. Like I said, have that number 6 or whatever brush that you bought with your art store paint kit that you're just not using because it's too big to put on a mini. I use that as my water brush. Having a brush that you can move water around your palette with is good. And notice I said move water around the palette. I don't feel like cleaning an extra brush. So instead of using a dropper or anything like that, I just I use a big brush, and then I just kind of push my finger on the side of it after I've dipped it in water, and let a drop or two fall out of it onto the palette, depending on how much paint I'm using and how much I need. And then I'll mix it into the paint till it's the right consistency, and then I'll start layering the model with it. On the palette right now, like I said, there's a big old splotch of Kislev flesh of the there's a big old splotch of the Emperor's Children on there too. Oh my gosh, is that another innuendo, or should we assume violence with that one? And the other one's, like I said, Lead Belcher. I've got Lead Belcher, the Kislev, and the Emperor's Children all splattered on my tile right now that I've been using as a palette. And when I go to put more paint on, I will just use a razor blade, scrape that off, rub the palette down with a little bit of alcohol on a paper towel, and I'm ready to go. So I will mix, water and paint with the brush that I'm going to use to paint that color with. But yeah, I don't have a brush just for mixing paints. I think it's just a pain in the ass, and you're putting another brush in the mix to paint. But if you bring water to your palette via, for instance, a thicker flat brush, or like I said, in this case, I'm using a number 6, and I guess you just put water, onto the palette near as you can to the paint, and then just use the paintbrush that you're going to use to paint that color, and then tease the water in until it's the consistency that you want it to be. That would be my advice there. With a wet palette, it's obviously a little bit different, and the moisture of the wet palette will keep your consistency a little bit different as well, and the moisture will keep your paint a little bit softer while you're painting. So when I show you, I'll try and take a picture of the palette and put it up. When you see the palette, you'll see, the leftover paint that I didn't use, and I was a little wasteful with the pink. I probably could have gotten away with a lot less. And I thought, I thought I would use a little bit more Kislev than I did. But Lead Belcher, you have to put a little bit on there because you have to keep, for the metallic colors, you have to constantly keep mixing them together to have good effect, because they want to separate. Shake that pot of paint very well, and always make sure that if you're not using a pot of paint, after you've pulled paint out of it with whatever tool that you decide to use, close. My advice would be to close that pot up immediately. That way you don't spill it. So, trying to think if there's anything else we need to talk about. Let's talk a little bit more about shades and contrasts. So, like I said, I would set aside, right before you do shading and contrast, after you've done your detailing, I would set aside, this is kind of like the touch-up phase. And like I said, I would go to whatever I have the most colors of, where other colors have hit or bled into, and I would essentially use those 3 base colors just a little bit, and go back and with a small brush. For this, I'd probably use a 0 or a 00, and I would just touch up whatever parts were accidentally hit with the other paints. And once you start using shades and contrasts, you'll understand why. That stuff gets everywhere, and you have to be very careful with it. Like I tease mine off the brush. I think about what area I want it to, soak into the most, and then I drop it off the brush, and then very, very slowly just kind of brush it away. So it has like this really cool look to it. But shading and contrasts, the reason why you want to do these last is if they, if you're doing anything, if you say I had just painted the Kislev flesh onto my model, and now I want to make it look like leather right away, and then I shade it with Agrax. Agrax. I shade it with Agrax Earth Shade. So if I'm using the Earth Shade, if I go to hit that with another color, and or if I'm, heaven forbid, you're detailing and you mess up, and you hit that which has already been stained on your model, it is going to be hell to repair. because not only is there a layer, is there a base, a layer, and now either a technical or a shade there to give it, more, contrast and color. It's gonna look really bad. So I really recommend that things like washing your minis are the last thing that you do. Also, something you can do with a lot of the bases and layers is water them down to the point where you can use them as a contrast or a shade. Although I think that the Citadel system has some very nice contrasts and shades, and you don't need to worry about those things really. You already there's a lot of colors in that palette, just not a good light pink color at all. I'm never gonna stop harping on that. At least not while talking about painting. I don't think there's anything else on this subject that we can chat about. We've gone over priming. We've gone over putting on the layers. We've gone over keeping the layers simple. We can talk a little bit more about detailing, I suppose. As you detail, you want to move into smaller brushes. I start big and then I'll go down. But this is where things like my 0, 00, and 000 brushes get introduced into the mix. Because I'm constantly going down and trying to put more detail into things that have less paint on them. Because everyone's going to see those main colors, those three, your three base colors, more than anything else. So little things like details. It's really cool when they stand out. For instance, just like I said, taking gold weapons and then putting some, Nuln Oil on them to give it some actual color contrast. Or, like I said, taking the Earth Shade and staining over the Kislev flesh to give it a, tanned leather look. So there's tons that you can do there, and like I said, it adds so much detail without you having to paint it onto the model, without you sitting there and having to just keep putting lighter color after lighter color to to give something color depth. It kind of works in the opposite direction, whereas like the difference between tinting and shading. It's kind of like that. Whereas you lighten with one and you darken with the other. So, yeah, I don't know that there's much left. I feel like I'm just looking for things to talk about and rambling at this point. But yeah, I would watch the steps in which you put paint on the minis. Like I said, start off with your primer coat and try and get the primer as close to the color if you can. And like I said, I think popular ones to work in: White Scar, Wraithbone, Abaddon Black, and Lead Belcher. One tip: someone in the comments section had mentioned that I can buy, when we were on my episode about the cost of Warhammer, had mentioned that I can buy primer at the hardware store, and it should work just as well. So, I think I'm going to buy some primer at the hardware store for, about half the cost of the Warhammer primer, and put that on. I don't want to talk too much about airbrushing because I don't know too much about airbrushing and haven't done it. I'm still working with the paint brushes and trying to master those. So I'm not at a point yet where I want to, start experimenting outside of my comfort zone because I still haven't found a zone to be comfortable in, if that makes sense. I've really been enjoying painting the minis, and like from every step of Warhammer, from the building and the posing to the painting to the playing. I've just been having an absolute blast. I have a 1,000-point game coming up this weekend that I am very much looking forward to. I'm gonna love getting out of the house and into somebody else's and go play Warhammer for a little bit. I love throwing dice around. I don't care how. I love the feel of throwing the bones, the Astragalus, if you will. Yeah, I think in lieu of me sitting here and rambling for another 15-20 minutes, I'm gonna call it on the podcast. If I think about anything else in the stylings of painting, maybe I'll drop them as a footnote in the beginning of the next episode. But I think I've given enough advice, at least where I can give it, and unfortunately, I can't speak too much to basing because I haven't based any of my minis yet. And I don't mean mount the mini on the base. I mean actually sit there and paint the base to match the mini and match the theme and scenery. I had mentioned in the assembly episode that I think I want to paint. Or I think I want to, when I put the rest of my GSC together, I want to use the Necromunda bases to make it look like they're all standing on the floors of a slaughterhouse. I think that would just be so cool. And once I opened that Necromunda box, I just fell in love with those bases. So I'm probably going to have to spend a little bit of money on those before I can buy anything else. All right, folks. It's been a pleasure just sitting here and rambling, and I hope you enjoy listening to these. If you have any suggestions or anything you'd want me to talk about, or anything that you disagree with or think that I'm not doing right, by all means. Like I said, feel free to criticize me. I'm not I'm not a person that's been doing this for 14 years. I don't know everything. I've been doing it for 6 months, and I'm doing it for fun. I'm not doing this to stress myself out. I'm doing this to relax and, have some fun, albeit building models, painting models, or playing with my models on tabletop battles. This is something I've truly been enjoying, and I just want to say thank you to all the people on social media that have shot me tips, the friends that have definitely helped me, and there's a couple people online that have definitely been helping me, and I want to give them some shout outs soon. So for sure. Like I said, thanks for sticking with me and sticking with this podcast, and yeah. I really enjoy this Warhammer thing, and thanks for coming along this journey with me. I think it's far from over, and I think this podcast is far from over. Let's see how far we can go, and let's keep stretching this out. All right. So this is the 40K Parley podcast, Book 1, Chapter 5. Part 2, Painting, continued. Dun 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 dun. All right, you don't need me to hum Beethoven's Fifth. I got music probably already playing me out. All right, folks, take care, and like I said, hit me up in the comments. Feel free to make some suggestions for the Patreon. Like I said, I have a Patreon, and I'd love to know what people want for content up on there. Yeah, like I said, I'm gonna keep working at this, and like I said, if you have suggestions or if you want to talk, feel free. It is 40K _ Parley on Instagram, and feel free to DM me there. And like I said, if you have any episode suggestions or ideas, or if you just want to call me a jerk because you don't think I'm doing something right, that's cool too. I have no problem. Like I said, I have no problem punching up or down. It's perfectly okay for me. So, But like I said, in all honesty, I have truly been enjoying this, and this podcast has been a lot of fun for me to do. So I'm going to keep at it, and like I said, keep listening and keep enjoying, and yeah, let's end it. Done. We're out of here. All right, folks. Lord Red Dog is he's done. He's done rambling for the night. All right, folks. Take care.